Hey, sports card fans, it's John Wade Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. I don't normally do commentary videos. In fact, this may be my first commentary video that I do of someone else's video. But I was watching one of John Mangini's recent videos, and I thought it was great. He raised some great questions, made some great points based on some of the questions that he raised, to himself. Really good conversation and discussion. And I was just going to leave a comment on his video. And the more I thought about it, there was more that I wanted to say about all the questions and things that he brought up in that video, that it warranted maybe me doing a video of my own to talk about the specific questions and points that he raised in that video. The video is entitled "A Very Serious Hobby Discussion." I think it was maybe put out less than a week ago. If you haven't seen that video, I will have a link to John's video in the description of this video. Definitely go check it out. Again, I thought John did a great job, so this isn't a critique on John's video. It's my take and my comments and thoughts about the various questions that he raised. Now, so what I'm going to do in this video here, and I hope it doesn't go too long, but there are some points that I want to try to make, and so we'll see how that goes. What I'm going to do, though, is go through the different points that he makes in order in his video there, and then give my sort of response or thoughts on the different questions that he raises. So bear with me here. I have some notes off to the side here that I want to refer to, both saying what the questions are that John raised or the comments that he brings up and my different responses to them so I don't miss anything. So the first thing he brought up in the video is he talks about, I guess, the growing instances, and I personally haven't seen it. Maybe I'm just not up on some of the news or different findings out there in the hobby. But in terms of vintage cards, he says that there seems to be a growing trend of restoring vintage cards, or in some way doing some alteration to the cards to make them look nicer, be in a higher grade, in theory, to attempt to try to make more money off of a card. Now, we've seen this for probably decades with people trimming cards. So they'll shave off one side of the card to make the edges better or the corners sharper. And I think the card companies have done, they're getting better, I think, in recognizing trimmed cards. Sometimes they mistake a card thinking that it is trimmed, and actually that's just how it came from the manufacturing process, especially from cards from the 50s. The printing process and manufacturing of cards was a lot different than it is today. So you could get some cards that may be slightly undersized or oversized just through the manufacturing process back then. But I think card companies are trying to spot cards that have been trimmed. They're not always successful, so he brings this up, and he goes into the point of, well, is grading a scam? And my response to that is, I don't think grading is a scam per se. However, I think the grading card companies need to do a lot better job of identifying cards that may be restored or altered in some way. If restored or altered cards are not spotted and given a grade, well, then I think that would undermine the whole grading process, and people would be less trustful of a particular grade that a card may get, because they may not know whether, okay, was this card altered or restored in some way to get this particular grade, and they would just put the whole grading system into question if that becomes more prevalent. So I think the card companies, there has to be a way to be able to identify something that has been restored trimmed, altered in some way. When it comes down to actually the debate of, is it a problem that some people are turning to restoring or altering cards? I don't have a problem with it if, and it's a huge if the cards are identified as such, either by the person submitting the card or by the the grading companies identifying the card as being restored or altered. And the reason why I say I don't have a problem with it is, now I'm not too familiar with the comic book market, although I did have some old comic books that I inherited from my grandfather, and I decided they had some value, and I'm not a comic book collector, so I decided to sell them. And in order to do so, I sent them to CGC. I think they're the ones that do comics for grading, because just like baseball cards, hey, I want to know what these grades for. I may get a higher price for them if they were graded. And one of them was a fairly valuable comic book. And in discussion, I sold them through Heritage Auction. And in the discussion with the folks at Heritage, there's some definite wear to it. The cover had been removed from the staples. And they said, well, if you pay to get the comic book restored, now it would be labeled as such. So I guess CGC has different colored labels for comic books, ones that are in original condition and ones that have been restored or altered in some way. So it's fully disclosed. And at least in the comic book market, they recognize that, they understand that, and they bid or buy comics accordingly. Some people don't want any comics that are restored. Some don't mind. And so I had that one valuable one restored, and for the cost of restoration, it sold for more than what it would have sold for if I had not gotten it restored. So again, I'm not opposed to people restoring sports cards, vintage sports cards, as long as it is identified as such, and then let the market decide. If buyers don't mind buying a restored card and either paying more or less, so it could be a restored 7, okay? Even the comic book grading companies give it a grade, but it's a restored grade. So if the card, say, in its current condition would only be a 5, but if you do some restoration to it, it could look a 7. To me, that is like having a 7 OC or an authentic card. People out there don't mind buying authentic cards or authentic altered, depending on the grading company and how they're labeled. But they know what they're buying, and they're comfortable paying a certain price, whether that's more or less than the actual number grade or whatever, but let the market decide. And if it's a case where these people who decide to restore these cards and send them in and find out, well, they're not getting any type of premium, it may say, hey, I got a 7 restored, and I'm not even getting close to a 7 price, I'm getting more like a 5. Maybe that'll discourage people from restoring cards or altering cards in order to try to make more money. If they find out that they can't do that, then maybe that'll curtail or stop people restoring cards. So I know that was a long discussion there and topic, but I wanted to bring that up because I did think about the comic book market and how restored comics are part of the hobby. So he also brings up the next question. Will it change the way we looked at graded cards? Will collectors change their opinion of older slabs and want them since there's a greater chance that the card has not been restored in some way? So again, this is assuming that an altered card is not identified as such. And like I said, my example of one that would grade as a 5, but now it's been restored to a 7. If these are known to be out there in the market, but they're not identified as being restored or altered, then yeah, I agree with you, John, that quite possibly people nowadays say, it's an older slab, grading was a lot looser back then, I'm not going to pay. Yeah, it says a 7, but it's an older slab. I'd rather have a new 7 because that's more accurate. I've heard that. Then maybe people will start saying, hey, that's a newer slab. I don't trust the newer slabs now, and I want older slabs. So yeah, that could be a switch in the market there. So I agree with John's take on that. The next thing that he brought up in his video is that those that either claim or have been accused of restoring cards, they say, well, hey, it's my card. I can do whatever I want with it. And to some extent, that's true. And I think John agreed with that, but he also makes a excellent point, and I agree with it as well, that, okay, you're not always going to have that card, right? Either, and John brings it up again, if financial situation, you pass away, all right? Is your heir or those that inherit the cards, are they going to know that this particular card, that you restored it or altered it in some way? They're probably not going to know. And then they're going to sell it, most likely. And then it gets in the market. And then now we have a restored card being seen as or reported as a regular card, and it impacts the market. So the next thing he talks about is it ethical to restore or alter a card? My response to that is, if it's not caught, if it's not disclosed, if someone is trying to skirt the system, so to speak, then yeah, I agree. It's not ethical to do that, because you're changing the current state of the card as it is today. Now, I guess you could make a point, I don't know who would do this, but in some sense, you could take a card and bend it in half and put a big crease in it and say, oh, well, I, changed the current condition of the card. Well, yeah, but I don't know who would do that, because it's going to become less valuable. So the question is making some changes to try to make it appear to be in a better condition. It's one thing to destroy. It's another thing to try to rebuild it as something that it may have been at some point in the past. So again, I don't have a problem with it as long as it's disclosed and the buyer and seller, well, especially the buyer, is aware that the particular card has been restored or altered or trimmed in some way. And then the market will decide if that card gets sold and for what price. He also talks about what about cracking a card to try to get a higher grade. We see that I see this all the time in videos, especially for modern cards. They'll do a submission. Oh my gosh, it came back in 8, and usually their first comment is, well, maybe I'll crack it out and submit it again and hope to get a 9. I personally don't like that practice, because what it does is it dilutes, I don't want to use the word scam, but it just dilutes the whole grading system and process. You had an individual, and we're all human, even graders, they're human. At that point in time, that one third-party individual said that for whatever reason, that card is an 8. But you're like, oh, no, I don't agree with that. So I'm going to crack it out of its slab and submit it. And hopefully another person on a good day that has a cup of coffee and is not, jittery and stuff, maybe they'll give it a 9. I don't particularly like that practice. And then he raises the question, well, if it does come back higher and you go to sell it, are you going to disclose that, hey, this card was originally an 8, but I cracked it out and submitted it, and now it's a 9, so pay me a PSA 9 value? No one's going to do that. I agree with John. No one's going to disclose that it was, a previously a lower grade, and then they got a new higher grade. Okay, moving on here, and I know this is going pretty long here, but he starts talking about the authentication process for autograph cards. And can we really be sure that an autograph card is authentic? And my response is no, not 100%, unless the person authenticating it actually sees the person sign the card, and at that point in time encapsulates it, authenticates it, whatever, puts a sticker on it, however the process is done. To me, that's the only way you can 100% authenticate, say, an autographed card. My wife is a notary, so I equate it to notarizing a legal document. To notarize a document, that individual needs to be in the presence of the notary, sign the document, and that notary then stamps the document, signs it to say, this individual in my presence signed this document. To me, that's the same thing as authenticating an autographed card. That's the only way you can know 100% that that's that player's autograph on that card. So anything beyond that, again, you have experts out there, but they're people, they're individuals. I mean, even some experts have been fooled. There are some really good forgeries out there. And so as long as, I don't think authenticating autographs is a scam, but it's all buyer beware. If you go into a transaction buying an autographed card where the authenticator did not see that player physically sign that card, you don't know for sure. There's no way to know for sure that player signed that card. Now, personally, I have no interest in collecting autographed vintage cards. The only autographed cards I have are Wade Boggs cards, and the only ones that I collect are pack pulled. In other words, the card company issued. They have the statement on the back, sticker on card auto, whatever, but they're pack pulled autograph cards. Those are the only cards, autograph cards that I collect. I'm sort of old school in the sense that I always thought having a player sign a card takes away the value, that sort of destroys the card a little bit. Same line of thinking of, hey, you bought a card that maybe some kid put their initials on, or wrote in pencil or pen on the back, changed the name of the team because they got traded or whatever. That's an ink mark, and the card gets reduced in value because it's been altered, changed, damaged in some way because there's some ink on it. That's how I look at a signature. Again, maybe it's a little bit outdated view, but I always thought having a player sign a baseball card, again, not pack issued by the card company, as somehow destroying the card. I don't see the extra value in it or the interest in it, but I know there are a lot of people out in the hobby. So again, I'm not saying that it's wrong to collect those cards. I know there are a ton of TTMers out there and a lot of Hall of Fame collectors out there that love to have a card signed by, say, the Hall of Famer on one of their playing days cards. And that's great. Collect what you enjoy and like. I personally don't want to collect those types of cards. All right. So again, John continues here, and again, he brought up a lot of great topics and questions. It was a really great video. Does the number grade on a graded card determine our enjoyment of the card? Especially if we like the card ungraded, but decide to grade it and it doesn't come back with the grade it should be. So he's like, oh, I love this card. I'm going to send it in for grading, and it comes back at a grade that we think is unfair. Do we like the card less than we did before? For me, no. I don't. The number grade of the card does not, for me, determine the enjoyment of the card. To me, the card itself, the eye appeal, determines my enjoyment of the card. The grade doesn't matter to me. The only thing that I care about the number grade is to determine what cards I can look to buy based on my budget and the overall eye appeal. So I look at it this way, and yeah, the question is, and I don't think it's something else that he talked about here. Yeah. So it raises the question: do you buy the slab or do you buy the card? And to me, I don't buy the slab, but in a way I do. So I'm going to try to explain it here, and I hope it's not double speak, but hopefully you'll understand my thought process here. When I go to look to buy a particular card, I look at the number grade in the sense of what that particular card would cost me. I have a budget, and so if I'm only looking or can afford a certain dollar amount for a particular card, I'm going to determine, okay, sevens go for here. Okay, I can't afford that. All right, so I'm not going to look for sevens. That's not even going to be in my thought process. What about a six? No, can't really afford sixes. They're just a little bit too high for me right now. All right, I can take them out of my vision in terms of cards that I look for to buy. Can I afford a five? Okay, yeah, maybe I can afford a five. So now my thought process is beyond the number grade, and now I look for cards for sale, whether it be on eBay or at the National or something like that. I'm going to pass by all the cards that are graded higher than a five because I know I can't afford them. Then I say, okay, well, here's a five. Well, maybe here's a four. Now I know I'm in my price range. Now I can focus on the eye appeal of the card. One example I give, I've talked about it before, my 1965 Topps Steve Carlton rookie card. I bought it at the National a couple years ago. The same dealer at the same table had a PSA 4 copy and a PSA 5 copy. Now, I knew ahead of time, it was sort of on my radar, and so I had already done some pricing again to know what grade I could even possibly look at a Steve Carlton rookie card for. And a 5 was doable, and so I looked at both of them. I said, hey, let me see the 4, let me see the 5. And honestly, my eye appeal went to that 4. And I decided to buy that because I liked the look of that card. It just happened to be a 4 versus a 5. If it was switched around and I liked the eye appeal of the 5, okay, I probably would have bought that one and paid a little bit more, because between those two, I enjoyed the look of the card, the one card over the other. So to me, I don't really care if it was the 4 or the 5. It just happened to be the 4, and I saved money. So that was good in that sense. And between those two cards, I got the card that I enjoyed more because it was centered a little bit better. The colors were a little bit nicer. And so in that sense, I don't buy the slab. I buy the card. But the number on the slab does determine on what cards I look for to buy. So again, I hope it's not double speak there, and you understand my thought process or mindset. And then he talks about the new SGC slabs, the new label, where First thing you see in that label is the number grade. And personally, that's one of the reasons why I like to collect PSA slabs. I have one or two cards in the new SGC holder. Just that was the way I acquired them. I bought the card that way. I didn't send them in for grading. They were Boggs cards. And yeah, you go to pick up the card and your eye can't but help see the number grade on it. I don't need to be reminded of what the number grade of the card is. When I pick up the slab, I want to look at the card. I want to enjoy the card. So to me, the SGC label sort of interferes with my enjoyment of the card. So that's one of the reasons why, among others, that I'm a PSA guy. And again, he did bring up, do we collect slabs now or the cards? And I discussed that there. And then he says, well, what about cards that appear to be overgraded? Oh, well, this is it's a 5, but it's really, man, for a 5, it should be a 6. It's undergraded. He said, would anyone, want to get them reslabbed or crossed over? Or I'm sorry, overgraded, not undergraded. He talks about a card being overgraded, that you look at it and go, boy, how did that get a 6? I don't know. That, to me, that looks a little bit overgraded. He said, who would want to, we talk about, cracking a card out to try to get a higher grade. Who would ever want to crack that card out and either cross it over or get it resubmitted if they think that it's going to get a lower grade? My response to that is I sort of agree with his logic, but for me personally, actually, I'm going to be doing that. One of my goals for 2024 is to start a fund for me to cross over all my BVG graded slabs. And I'm doing so knowing quite well that when I send them off to PSA is most likely on every single one of them going to knock the grade down. Now, I don't know by how much, and I'm okay with that. And the reason being is I like the cards. I just hate the slab. I don't like the BVG slab. Sorry, Beckett. I just don't like it. So I want to convert them over to PSA. But I'm doing so being fully well aware that the number grade is probably going to change and is probably going to go down. And I'm okay with that because, again, I like the cards. I don't want to... One of the suggestions was, well, John, why don't you just sell the BVG slabs, take that money, and then buy a PSA, the best PSA graded card that you can, that you like. I like the ones I have. So why should I go through the whole process of selling it and having to buy a new one? I'm just going to crack them out, submit them to PSA, and whatever the new grade comes back, that's the new grade. And I'm going to be fine with it. Because I want everything in PSA. Okay, I don't know if this is I think he had two more quick thoughts here. I know I'm running really long here. I appreciate if you're still sticking with me here. He said, what's the point of grading if the grading companies can't tell if a card has been restored or altered, or if they can't properly grade a card? So, why would you even want to get your cards graded? Now, I've talked about in different videos why I want my vintage cards graded. There are a lot of collectors out there that none of their cards are graded. They love to have the ungraded, I won't say raw, but ungraded cards in their collection, and that's fine. To me, for a variety of reasons, I'm not going to go into them now because that's a whole nother discussion of why I prefer my vintage cards graded, but I do. So I'm going to continue to buy graded cards, get my BVG cards switched over to PSA. There may be some cards in the future that I currently have ungraded that I'm going to send to get graded. Again, that's just a personal choice for me. Every collector out there can do what they want to do that makes them happy and enjoy the hobby. His last thing, at least that I'm going to comment on, I think he brought up a couple other topics, but I'm not going to bring them up here. When big money is involved, it brings out unscrupulous people trying to take advantage of people. And John, I completely agree. I think big money is negatively affecting or negatively impacting the hobby, especially for modern cards. It just seems that, and again, I've been collecting for 45 years now. I lost track. To me, it was always about the enjoyment of collecting the cards. It wasn't, it would be nice to know, hey, this card of mine is worth X. Well, it's not worth anything until you actually go to sell it, but that's another discussion. But hey, my card is worth X or whatever. But it for the longest time, money was involved because you exchanged money for card. You bought and sold cards, so there was always a money component. But for the longest time that I've been collecting, it just, money wasn't the primary factor in whether you bought or sold a card. It just seems today, maybe not so much in vintage, but I'm sure there's some areas of vintage. It's more on the modern side, where it almost seems that the money aspect or the investment side of it almost is taking precedence over the cards themselves. And when you have a situation like that, that is ripe for people to take advantage of others, whether it be restoring, trimming, doing something to get that higher grade, cracking out a lower grade slab to submit it to try to get a higher grade. It's all about, oh, well, geez, I bought this card raw and I set it in for grading, and I have X amount into it now, and I'm looking to flip it and make money. So I'm going to do whatever I can, crack it out of a slab. Okay, maybe I'll wipe it down a little bit better because maybe there was something on the surface, or do this or do that to try to get a higher grade so I can make money. It's not about the card anymore. It's about making money. And I think that's not good long-term for the hobby, in my opinion. Then the last thing I want to talk about is sort of on some general topic that John was talking about in his video. I've always treated grading as a guide, just like back in the day when I used to get the Beckett price guides. In the name itself, it's a price guide. We're relying on the publishers of that price guide, or an individual sitting at some desk at SGC or PSA or whomever, and taking a look at the card and giving their opinion on what the grade is of a particular card. So I don't take the number grade of a card as gospel, because I know that it's not perfect. So again, I use it as a guide in determining what cards I look to buy, because the number card does factor into the price that I would have to pay. I've picked up lots of PSA 4s that look great. I've picked up some PSA 5s that I got a deal on because they look more like 4s. Okay, at the end of the day, do I like the look and the eye appeal? Do I enjoy that card? Yes. So whether it's a 4 or a 5, I use that as a general guide in what I would be willing to pay for that card. I don't look at it as, hey, I have a PSA 5 per se of this card, and I like it because it's a PSA 5. I like the card because it's the card. Now, when I collected and built my Kari Ostremski run, I was more concerned about the overall condition. I wanted really nicely centered cards. For those cards, I wanted sharper corners. I wanted a higher condition card just for that player, because I wanted nicer copies for my Corey Yastrzemski run. So again, as a guide, I looked for higher number grade copies because in general, they would look in better conditions than say 4s or 5s. So I was looking for 6s and 7s. Finally, I guess generally as a summary here, I'm not personally worried about the potential impact of restoring or altering cards, since the cards that I typically buy, they're low to mid grade cards. And so the chances of someone altering a PSA 461 Topps Hank Aaron card, I think are pretty low. I think if someone's going to restore a 61 Topps Hank Aaron, they're going to be shooting to restore it to a 6, 7, 8. Even a not. I mean, take a 6 and try to turn it into a 7 or 8. I don't think they're going to try to take all that time and effort to restore a 3 to look like a 4. I just don't think, again, if they're doing it for the money, I don't think the money is there for them. So I'm sort of insulated in the cards that I buy in my collection. I'm looking at that low to mid grade. Now, again, if I'm looking at a low grade 52 Topps Mickey Mantle, say in a 1, I'm going to be concerned and worried that, hey, has this card been restored or trimmed or altered in some way? Because even a PSA 1 52 Topps Mickey Mantle is worth a lot of money. But right now, unless things change, I am not in a market for some of the really rare high-end cards, even in low grades. So again, I'm sort of insulated. So I don't want to say I don't care, because I want the hobby to be successful and thrive long term. But for me personally, I don't think it's something I need to be concerned of in terms of my personal collection. So in conclusion, will I continue to buy slabbed vintage cards? Yes. But I'm also going to do so with knowing that it's not perfect. The grade may not be correct. And as to the whole issue of restoring or altering cards, again, if it becomes more of a thing in the hobby, I'm hoping that either the card companies step up and start recognizing it and labeling it as such. And again, I don't have a problem if the hobby and collectors in general accept restored cards, as long as they're disclosed as such, and then let the hobby decide what they want to pay or give a value for those cards, just like comic books. So again, I know this has taken a long time. As you can tell, I had a lot of thoughts about John's video. Again, excellent video. Definitely go check it out. John, you always have some great videos, some great thoughts to bring out to the hobby and to collectors out there. And I just wanted to take this time here to just fully respond and give my thoughts on that. So would love your thoughts on my thoughts on John's comments in the comments of this video. And with that, that's all I have for you. So until next time, thanks for watching.